Hello, I'm Marilyn Hemingway, and welcome to A Gathering Place. I said, I'm stepping back because we have young voices who want to be heard and they're moving on something.
Branding is really important to you and your business.
Even a basic type of technology, you learn it all.
And people are
Good question. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Gathering Place, hosted by the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. And my name is Marilyn Hemingway, president and founder of the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. And I am happy to be with you today. I have two great guests with me today, Miss Ebony Hughes with Access Alliance Insurance, and Deontay Winchester, who is a counselor, therapist, and a lot of other stuff. But what I don't get right now, they're going to correct me because I'm about to introduce them and they're going to give us more details because we're talking about businesses and how businesses can work together to provide services to our community and also to grow as businesses. So first, let's bring on Miss Ebony Hughes. Hi, Ebony. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Miss Marilyn?
I am wonderful. Thank you. And you're looking beautiful and fresh today. All right, and that's a special reason you're wearing those colors, and we're going to get to that in the show today. I also want to bring in Mr. Deontay Winchester. Hi, Deontay. How are you?
I am very well. How are you, Miss Hemingway?
I am doing great. Thank you very much. And you also are kind of playing that color scheme going on with Ebony for a particular reason. We're going to talk about that in the show. But I want to get started today's show talking about your businesses and how you two are ending up working together to provide a certain service. So, Ebony, we're going to start with you. Tell us your business, what's going on with it, because you got some new updates to let us know about beyond your recent work with Deontay, and we want to know what's happening. So, Ebony, tell us what's going on.
All right. So first of all, thank you, Miss Marilyn, for having me on the show. I love what you're doing. So just to sum things up, I actually have two businesses. I have an insurance agency. And over the years, what has happened is whenever I go to talk with individuals about insurance, such as Medicare or Medicaid, many of those individuals have other issues. You know, they may have issues with their home. They may need other services beyond the Medicare or Medicaid. So what I have done over the years was partner with other organizations that are able to address their needs, such as wheelchair ramps. We've helped individuals get homes, things that they really, really need. And so I just want to back up a little bit. When I went to college back at Coastal, I fell in love with the name of, actually at the time it was a new degree, and it was called health promotion. And what it talked about was bringing the medicine and holistic together to help people get treatment in a holistic manner. And so we start talking about the health triad, or either the 7 dimensions of wellness. And if a person can be balanced in all of those areas of life, then they can have a more balanced, healthy, fruitful life. So I, in turn, over the years, I had a dream of having an organization, a program that can help people with those areas. But there was an obstacle and a barrier that I noticed that most people faced. And that was that usually the person's behavior dictated whether they were going to be successful or not successful in those areas. You know, sometimes people may not be able to balance their finances because they have bad spending habits, or maybe they have other bad habits that cause issues in other areas. So that's how we started 7 Dimensions. So
let me ask you this. What are the 7 dimensions?
The 7 dimensions of wellness, or 7 dimensions of health, is the physical. That's the one people are normally familiar with. Finance, there's social, there's spiritual, there's environmental, there is career and intellectual. And if you sort of notice, it sounds like a repetition of some of them, because really in some of those areas of wellness, like you use the word interconnected, they flow together. So those are the seven dimensions of health.
They're all interconnected. So if one is out of whack, it's going to impact the other dimensions. And with intellectual, is that like education intellectual, or is that intellectual as in your mental well-being, or both?
Yes, it can be both. So some of those terms are interchangeable. You know, you may go on the internet and look at some of those terms. So emotional, social may be interchangeable at some points.
Okay, very good, very good. We're going to dive deeper into that because I've always found it fascinating, the connection between mental well-being and your physical well-being. And you are correct in saying when people think of health, they think more of the physical and don't think of the mental, and they also don't understand the connection between the mental well-being and your physical well-being. And that taps into spirituality, it taps into stress, dealing with stress, dealing with depression, etc. So we'll get into that because I think it probably connects with why you're working with Deontay a little bit more these days.
Yes, and I was
see,
just
see how I did that? I'm still winning.
I've seen you.
Yes. So working with Deontay, I'm so very blessed to have him on because, you know, I have the dream, but Deontay is the brains. He is the director of the program, and he can tell you more about what he'll be doing.
Yes, Deontay, please. Deontay, explain who you are, your educational background, because that's important for us to know in the context of this conversation, and what type of work are you doing now, and how did you come about in working with Ebony?
Well, my background is very interesting. I'm actually a retired Army non-commissioned officer. And I know a lot of people may look at me and say, well, he's a little too young to retire. It was actually a medical retirement after an injury incurred overseas. And what I actually did in the military was information technology. I have a degree in information technology and several certifications in the field as well. But after my retirement in 2012, I got out. I said, I'm still young. I got more life to live. I got more that I can give to the community. So I decided that I wanted to go back to school and learn a little bit more. And initially what I wanted to do was actually school psychology. So I enrolled in school and I got my Bachelor of Psychology and into grad school, in which I would have gotten a master's in psychology, well, actually a master's applied psychology en route to an EDS in school psychology. But it's so amazing the way God works sometimes. I actually was in a hospital when my nephew was there dealing with an ailment that he was taking care of at that time. And I was in the cafeteria and the cafeteria was full. So I ended up sitting across from a gentleman. Didn't know him, never saw him before, but I ended up striking up a conversation with him. And in the middle of this conversation, I realized that his name tag had something on it that was familiar to me because going through human services field and in my psychology, I understand that MSW is a master of social work. So I ended up asking him, what do you think of the field of social work as opposed to the field of psychology? I just graduated, yada, yada, yada. And this gentleman went on and he shared with me his perspective, and he was actually going to be a counselor as well, a guidance counselor. But the reason that he decided to be a social worker instead was because the field is so broad. And you can find a social worker in a medical office. We are counselors. We work in DSS, which is the field that many of us, when you hear social work, you think of someone that's going to try to take your child away. But it's so much more to the field of social work. We are leading agencies. We are everywhere. We are in every facet of life. There are actually social workers right now dealing with corporate things like training diversity and things of that nature right now. So um after he let me in on the fact that I would be much better off as a social worker and getting a master of social work, I did my research, figured out he was absolutely right. So I ended up applying to grad school for a master of social work. Best decision I ever made in my life. So I now have completed my master of social work. I am a licensed master social worker, and currently I am pursuing my independent licensure to conduct therapy as we speak. Um, Also, in school for a PhD in human and social services with an emphasis in community intervention and leadership.
Didn't I tell you he was a brains?
You know, I was thinking that right there. I said, this man's smart.
I don't know about all that. I barely skated through. Barely skated through.
Well, you're determined. It does take determination to get all those degrees and everything. So, how do you see that working with Ebony? What will that allow you and Ebony working together to accomplish? What's your goal with you two working together? Because let me say this before you answer that question. Since I've gotten to know Ebony and the work that she does, Ebony does social work. You know, it's not just about her business. Ebony is about people. And she's even connected me, helped me with my late father, connecting me to resources. So in some way, she's a social worker also. So I guess this kind of led you two into having conversations and deciding we could do something together as a business and also to help the community. So tell us your story. How did this come about? And I'll start with Ebony.
Well, it came about really because I had this dream, but as you can tell, I don't have the same education that Deontay has. So in order to actually work and do certain lines of work, you have to be credentialed. Now I have the connections with many partnerships that can help communities, and Deontay, in all of his experience. And so he knows what I do, and we've been working together in some other projects. So I told him one day, I said, I'm looking for a clinical psychologist, just a person with different degrees. And so he said he was working on his. And when he told me that he may be able to work with me, that was very exciting, knowing his background, knowing, he's a veteran and all of that. And just his experience, I know is going to work well, because whenever the children, and that's what we specialize in, Deontay works with children and has been in other organizations and that he's involved with. I know that he's a trustworthy person. He's a person that's good with children. He can communicate well with them. Children respond to him really good. And so working with him, that would allow for this to come to life, and also allow him to really be able to move forward with his career as it pertains to social work and working in a clinical setting.
Very good. So Deontay, how do you see this working with Ebony? How this came about, and what do you see happening moving forward?
Well, as previously mentioned, we have been working together in so many other ventures in the community. Both of us are very involved in the community, so we know each other very well because we're always crossing paths somehow, working on something. So, and you as well, Miss Marilyn. But Ebony and I, as she said, just ended up striking up this conversation after she figured out what my degree path was, and we decided that we wanted to work together. And the reason that I mainly wanted to do this is because the specialization with children and family services is something that's very important to me. And I don't want to prolong this, but to give you just a little bit of background about myself that I didn't mention before, I have quite a troubled, let's just call it, adolescence. When I was younger, I was actually expelled from school. Not suspended, expelled. They would not let me back anywhere close to the premises. 3 years in a row. And I ended up going to alternative school. I was put out of alternative school as well. So with that and the fact that I was able to bounce back from that and make a turnaround in my life, with the help of a strong mother that would not give up on me and others in the community, I feel like it's my responsibility to give back and to reach out to this next generation so they don't make any of the same mistakes I did. And also that experience, and the fact that I grew up in Charleston, a place where many might call the hood. So it's not a whole lot, when you add my military background to that, it's not a whole lot of things somebody can throw at me and make me become taken aback. I'm not going to say I've seen it all, but it's, I have a lot of experiences, so I can help to guide these children down the right path if I'm allowed to. And that's certainly what I want to do.
Awesome. Yeah. If I can just kind of throw something in there, things just really work in an amazing way. Like Deontay said, God really works in a mysterious way. Now, this has been a long time coming that I have wanted to put this together. But, since COVID has, the pandemic has swept through, we see the need for behavioral and mental health more and more. People are taken away from the social life that they're so accustomed to. That not only affects you mentally, it affects you physically. People have been affected financially. All those different areas of wellness that we've already mentioned, it's impacted by that. And so, especially with the youth, they're away from the socialization. And some of them may even be at home being exposed to things that they should not. They're different situations. So now, with all of this going on, we really felt the need to push to make this happen, because so many children and their families are counting on this outlet, this assistance. So it's an important thing. It's near and dear to my heart. But now it's more than just. It's an absolute need for this in the community.
So you two are going to be focusing on children? Is that my understanding?
Children and family services, primarily the children. But if there's a situation where it's best that there be a group or a family setting to help better serve that child, that's what we'll do as well.
So how do you two, let's kind of drill down a little bit now. I want to partake of your services. How do I get in touch with you to partake of those services? And Ebony, is that number you dropped to me?
Yeah.
Okay. So are you guys going to have a website or have a Facebook presence?
Yes. So right now you can call us or text message us. Sometimes we're trying to get technically savvy. So if text message is the best way that you can reach out, send a text message and we will have someone to call you and schedule a time that's going to be convenient to try to start that process. Or you can visit us on our Facebook profile. We are going to be constantly updating that also, which is at 7 Dimensions Outreach, which briefly, I want to say we have a non-profit department of 7 Dimensions of Health. And the nonprofit, I'll be just really brief, we're able to work with the family and youth and just provide different resources. Such as filing and applying for Medicaid, again, all these other services that a person may need. We can help you with that. And we build a lot of partnerships. Like right now, we built a partnership with DHEC. And because of COVID, they're providing materials and coloring books and things for the parents and the children to understand and get scientific information about COVID so they can understand how to better protect themselves.
So what are you two calling? So you have what you're doing, your businesses. Is this a totally separate setup? And what are you calling it? Or is it just a service provided, Ebony, under your current businesses? So what do you call it?
It's 7 Dimensions of Health, LLC. It's a completely different business.
Seven Dimensions of Health, LLC. Very good. Congratulations. So let's get into, I'm an individual. I know you said you're focusing on family and children, but what are you finding out there? Ebony mentioned COVID, and I don't know why we lost Ebony. So Deontay, she just disappeared. So I'm assuming she's gonna come back in. But Deontay, so what are the things you're finding when it comes to COVID, for example, that we need to be aware of as individuals, that maybe we're not in the best place mentally or
Well,
emotionally?
I think the biggest thing that we need to realize is that the COVID has caused us to become isolated, which in turn causes us to become a little bit more, or actually a little bit less willing to converse and to just build interpersonal relationships with others. When this thing is over, and I'm going to say when, even though we don't see the end in sight,
It is gonna be over. Yeah. But
yes,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
we're going to have to work hard to rebuild the ability to talk to one another and to interact with one another effectively. Because now everything is like, right now, we're online. We're not in a room right now talking. Most of our meetings are Zoom. You know, our business meetings or our conferences are Zoom. We're not meeting with people anymore. So that's something that we're gonna have to become accustomed to again. And
I
and
can't wait to have a drink with friends. I'm
oh,
serious.
absolutely,
You know,
absolutely.
go ahead.
And mental health is something. Just speaking for the Black community, mental health is something that's often taboo. And actually, I'd like to talk about that for a moment if I can.
Please do.
So
We don't talk about it enough. So please do talk about it.
while the experience of being Black in America is not monolithic, there are some shared cultural factors that play a role in defining mental health and supporting well-being, resilience, and healing. Part of this shared cultural experience, like values, community, uh, family connections, and spirituality, music, and reliance on community and religious networks and things of that nature are enriching, and they also can be a great source of strength and support. However, and this is a big however, another part of this shared experience is facing racism, discrimination, and inequality that can significantly affect a person's mental health. Being treated or perceived as less than because of the color of our skin can be stressful and even traumatizing. Additionally, members of the Black community face additional challenges accessing the care and treatment that we so desperately need. According to the Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health, Black adults in the U.S. are more likely than white adults to report persistent symptoms of emotional distress, such as sadness and hopelessness. Also, Black adults living in poverty are twice as likely to report such psychological distress than those living beyond or above the poverty line. But despite those needs, only 30% of the Black adults who need these health care and mental health services actually do receive it. And according to American Psychiatric Association, APA, Mental Health Facts for African Americans Guide, we are less likely to receive consistent care, less frequently included in research, and more likely to use emergency rooms or primary care to seek services as opposed to a mental health specialist in that field. And if I may, I'd also like to talk about some of the barriers to our mental health care. And the first one would be socioeconomic disparities. And that's for obvious reasons. If someone doesn't have the resources and they can't afford to get the care, they just aren't going to be able to do it. And this is why when we look at things like individuals in court right now fighting to abolish the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, think about all of the individuals who are going to lose health care. And
Millions, 20
everybody,
million.
20 million people, and everybody is going to lose coverages for pre-existing conditions, of which COVID is now going to be a pre-existing condition. Another barrier, and this is a major one, is stigma. Stigma around mental health conditions is still pervasive in our society. And in many Black communities, discussing mental health is a difficult subject. Research indicates that over 2/3 of African Americans believe that a mental health condition is a personal sign of weakness. Such stigmas act as a deterrent from people seeking mental health care. Additionally, many people choose to seek support from their faith community rather than seeking medical diagnosis. In many Black communities, the church plays a vital role as a meeting place and a source of strength, as I mentioned before. Faith and spirituality can help in the recovery process and be a part of a treatment plan. And what I mean by a treatment plan is, for example, your religious leader in a faith community can provide support and reduce isolation if you don't have family, and provide that support in place of a family or friends that you may not have. However, the faith community can sometimes be a source of distress and further stigma if they are misinformed about mental health or do not know how to support individuals or families dealing with these conditions. And I say often, if you've ever heard me speak, that your preacher should not be your therapist.
There you go.
In the Black community, that's something that we do oh so often. We go to church, but we need to also seek these mental health services that we need. Something else that we have to discuss as well, and I'm sorry to take up so much time.
Oh, no, this is important. And I think this is part of the services that you provide. And these are the discussions that we have, that we need to have, so that we can move forward as a community. But also, people need to realize that this is a service provided by businesses. And that's what the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce is about. It's making those connections, introducing those resources, networking, so we can know more about each other as businesses and support each other, and grow our customer base, client base, but also help our community.
Yes.
These conversations have to be had so we can help our community. And you talked about the stigma, all too often we don't talk about stuff. We use it debate. And I'm going to say this, then Deontay, I'm going to let you continue. If I hear one more time somebody say, I'm going to pray on it, and I don't say that to be disrespectful to our institution, the church, our community institution, the church, but I say that because it's a deterrent. People say that, and it's really disrespectful to the person who's hurting, because you're deflecting rather than being sincere about helping somebody. Oh, I'm going to pray on it. What does that really do? Because faith without works is dead.
There you go. And you also got to be careful who you let pray for you too.
That's right. That's right. Because they might not be praying with the best thing for you in mind.
Yeah. Some people will pray for your downfall.
Use the word pray, P-R-A-Y, or some people can P-R-E-Y.
That's true. Now, Ebony, you spoke a word on that one. You sure did, because that's the truth. And then some people do it unintentionally, which is just as harmful, because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But until we really have conversation about these topics, and I say that because I suffer from depression, have for years, and because I've been in therapy, I recognize the signs. Now that I'm at a point in my life where I can recognize the signs, and I step up more of what I need to do to deal with that depression. I might walk more, spend more time outside. This year I had a garden. It helped me I did a lot of my shows just sitting outside in the carport in my garden. It was not just because I wanted to be outside doing shows, but to be in the midst of growth. Planting a garden indicates hope. It indicates wellness, because you're planting a seed and you're nurturing it and you're growing it. We got to do more things like that, and we got to have these kind of conversations.
Well,
Yes,
you
Ebony.
see how just that quick, Miss Marilyn, through your experience, you've already hit on a number of different of the 7 dimensions of wellness already. You talked about not just the emotional side, you talked about how being outdoors helps you physically. You talked about growing a garden, that's environmental.
Mm-hmm.
And so you planting that garden not only helped you mentally, you also got to eat that stuff, and it helped you in so many different ways. So that's
Mm-hmm.
a good
Mm-hmm.
example. So
And it's still there's imbalance because one thing I've learned, life is a journey. And that journey means there are ebbs and flows, there are ups and downs, there are valleys, there's mountains. And if you accept that, then you just tend to start finding the balance. You will find balance in negative. You will find balance in positive. And I'm not saying being boring and oh nothing happens in your life. It's understanding the balance,
Yes.
you know.
And
Go ahead,
that
Deontay.
environmental factor is very important as well. There's actually a fairly new branch of psychology called environmental psychology. And environmental psychologists study things such as how individuals are affected by their environment and vice versa. Um, and we find that things like colors can affect your mood.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have direct sunlight, that you're often in a better mood and you often perform better at work and things of that nature. So you're definitely hitting on something good when you say you're out there in your garden and you're taking care of things of that nature. Self-care. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Whatever you need to do to make yourself feel better, find that thing and do it often.
that's right.
Yeah. And you both of you mentioned COVID and the impact in the context of this conversation. And I just recently read in the last month a research article about how now people are their exposure to vitamin D is diminishing because we're not outside as often as we used to be. And the sun is the biggest supplier of D, vitamin D, just simply going outside and spending time in the sun. And that's impacting people now. They can now see that it's impacting us. And I've made a point of recently going back outside and just to be out in the sun. You're right. Just the colors make a difference. That exposure makes a difference. And we need to really start thinking about that not only in terms of as adults, but how does this impact our children?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Have we talked about colors yet?
He just mentioned colors, but what do you want to add, Ebony, regarding the colors? The green. Yes. Speaking of colors, what you two are wearing green for a purpose today. So tell me why we're wearing green today.
Well, green is a color representative of depression, and October is actually Depression Awareness Month. So that's why Ebony and I are rocking the green today. Different shades, but we both doing it. And I'd like to just discuss a little bit about depression, some of the signs and symptoms, and what an individual should do if they believe. There you go. That
I wasn't
them or
playing.
someone they love are experiencing some of these symptoms. So a lot of people may say, "Oh, I'm feeling depressed today," or I'm not up to myself," or they may say, "Oh, you look like you're depressed." Depressed is not a mood. Depression is actually a clinical diagnosis. So when we look at depression, depression is a mental health disorder characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities causing significant impairment in daily life. So if you're depressed to the point that you're no longer finding satisfaction in the things that you used to find satisfaction in, you can't go to work, you can't function properly, your interpersonal relationships are being affected, you're certainly at the point where you probably need to seek some professional help and evaluate what needs to happen to help you in that situation. So some of the possible causes are a combination of biological, psychological, and social sources of distress. And what we mean by biological is a lot of times mental illness can be passed down from generations. We find that biology plays a large factor and mental health. Also psychologically, what we mean by that is psychology is just the functions of the brain. So the ways in which you process information can affect your mood and the ways in which you respond to certain situations in your environment. And social sources, that's people, for lack of a better term. If you're going through a divorce, that's a social source of distress. So that would be a major factor in the fact that you may be feeling a little depressed. And some of the symptoms and or warning signs that an individual may be depressed is when we look at the mood, there may be anxiety, apathy, which is a lack of feeling whatsoever. If you see a baby fall on the floor, you should be like, oh, is that baby okay? But if you just look at that baby like, oh, well, that's apathy.
And you go, oh,
It's the
life
opposite
happens,
of
right? Yeah.
sympathy.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It is.
Could be guilt, hopelessness, loss of interest, like I said earlier, mood swings, and often sadness. And when you look at the behavioral factors, you're looking at easy agitation, excessive crying, um, irritability, restlessness, or social isolation, meaning you don't want to be around anyone anymore. You used to be a social butterfly, but now you're just locked up in the house. Well, it might be something going on there, and it might be more to it that somebody need to look into. When you look at the sleep patterns, you wake up early, you may not be able to sleep well as you used to. That's called insomnia. You may be having excessive sleepiness, and you may be restless as you sleep, tossing and turning all night long. All of those are symptoms also of depression. But just because you're not sleeping well doesn't mean you're depressed. Um, uh, when you look at the whole body, it could be changes in your eating pattern. It might be excessive hunger, might be fatigue, and you might actually have a loss of appetite. And also, we have to look at cognitive. And when we look at cognitive, it just refers to conscious intellectual activities. So cognition can involve anything from your memory, your concentration, your ability to speak, motor function. All of that is involved in cognition. So when we look at cognition, there may be the lack of concentration, slowness, slow. I'm sorry, slow. Why am I getting a tongue twist from here? You may be a little bit slower than normal in activities, or a big one is thoughts of suicide. And anytime you may believe that someone is contemplating suicide, please take that serious.
Um,
Um,
let's stop there for a second, Deontay, and talk about that because we definitely do not talk about suicide in the Black community,
yeah,
and we actually have um, we attribute some deaths, unfortunately, to things beyond suicide. And I can understand for historical reasons why people would do that. But because we do not confront suicide, and when I say confront, talk about it in our community, it is actually growing in our community.
yes,
And a lot of times we say, oh, it was something violent done to someone, when the violence is our lack of caring about the person. The violence has been done before they committed suicide because we didn't get educated to recognize the signs
yes,
and take them seriously and deal with what our young people and not even young people, what our elders are going through. Because a lot of our elders right now in the time of COVID are lonely, they're disconnected from family and friends, and they may be having suicidal thoughts of why am I here? My life isn't worth living anymore, or giving up. Our young people with so much going on in the world now, um, where are my opportunities?
yes,
Maybe I don't have the education I need to do to pursue something I'm interested in. Can lead to depression, can lead to suicidal thoughts. But because we as a community do not have these conversations, we are ignoring the fact that some people even say Black people don't commit suicide.
I've
We
heard
do
that.
commit suicide.
Yeah.
We
too.
commit suicide.
And the
But it is
population is becoming younger and younger. So many young people now are
Yes,
committing suicide than before, and that's very concerning.
it
it
is.
is very concerning. And we need to get real about this. This is why it's so important that you and Ebony are working together so that we start to have these conversations more in the public sphere
Right.
so people can feel I can have a place to reach out to
Absolutely.
and
So,
just talk. Go ahead, Ebony.
you had the number up if anybody would like to find out what are the next steps. And I just want to say this, in our community, mental health, lately, I've been calling it more behavioral health because people can it's lighter on the ear to talk about behavioral health versus mental health. They're different, but they sort of go hand in hand. And in my philosophy, I think that people shouldn't wait till there's an obvious problem. Sometimes it's okay. Just like you can go through a life moment where you know what, I don't feel good. I need to talk to somebody. It doesn't have to be anything particularly major. It can be, oh, I've heard kids say, well, my girlfriend, my boyfriend broke up with me and I feel depressed, and that's one thing I want to caution, especially in our community. Don't say, well, that ain't nothing. They'll say, well, we had it worse than you guys. That's not anything major, but to that youth or to that person, it could be major to them. So just know that, whether it seems to someone else or to you small, you can just talk to somebody and it's okay because I've done it. I've had to call a counselor up and say, you know what? I need help sorting out a situation. And talking with that person sort of helped me hash out all the reality. And I felt better about it just speaking about it instead of keeping it locked in my head. Once you talk about it and let it out, it
Once
just
you release it.
release. There you go.
And sometimes to release it takes talking to a therapist. Yes, if you're more comfortable talking to your minister, go talk to your minister, but seek help, seek resources. And as Deontay was saying earlier, the church is not your therapist. It's different. There should be not be a stigma attached to going to therapy. I've done it myself, Ebony. Um, for me to start the journey that I am on now as an entrepreneur, there are two things that I did. I went to therapy because at the time I knew I was depressed. I was bored at work. There was a lot going on, and I just gotten in the habit. I knew I was depressed, but I knew I wanted to do something with my life beyond seeking therapy. So I went to a business course at the College of Charleston to become an entrepreneur. And if I had not done those two things, it would not have gotten me into the healthy mindset to take the risk of leaving a job. I was bored with it, not satisfied, but it was paying the bills. But I had to get healthy mentally to take that risk. And I haven't looked back since because it's made me stronger because I realized that these things that may seem huge at the time, and they are huge at the time, but in the big life story of Marilyn Hemingway or the big life story of any individual, you will one day be able to look back and see that it was a small bump. If you seek the mental health, the emotional health that we all need, that we
We
all
all
need. Mhm.
we all need. So when you talk about the seven, if I can throw this in, the seven dimensions, see, people are okay with having a coach. Like I was talking with my son, and he's a teenager, and I have to educate him on and on. And sometimes I have to tell him things over and over. But he really idolizes LeBron James. And I told my son, I said, a man like LeBron James has many coaches. Not only does he have his coach on the basketball, um, on the court, he also has a life coach. He has a fitness coach outside of all of that. He has a financial coach. He has all these different coaches in, and
Magic Johnson has been a business coach for him.
exactly. So behavioral health should be looked at. Okay, not if you have an emergency, definitely reach out for help. Miss Marilyn has a number down there at the bottom for an emergency. But don't think that behavioral health or mental health are things that you have to use when there's a huge emergency. You can seek that type of counseling or coaching, guidance any day, anytime.
Yes. And just to touch back just a little bit, I would be remiss if I didn't give a little bit more information about suicide and how to respond. So,
Please do.
um, if an individual has thoughts of suicide, we call this suicidal ideation. And you recognize that by if an individual is giving things away that you know are very near and dear to them. So if I one day go in my garage and tell somebody, hey, come pick up my Mustang and my motorcycle, something ain't right. Y'all call them people and get me some help real quick. Um, um, things like making final arrangements, asking about funerals and things of that nature. These should all be warning signs. And at that time, if this person is someone that you're comfortable with and you care about, you should ask them straight up, hey, are you thinking about committing suicide, or are you thinking about hurting yourself?
Straight
However
up.
you want to say it. And even if they do not come back and say, well, yes, I am, you should say something to the effect of, okay, do you have some type of plan to hurt yourself? And if this individual says anything to the nature of, yes, I have a plan, I'm going to take these pills, I'm going to take this gun, yada, 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 stay with that person so that they do not carry out that plan. And you can actually go ahead and call that hotline, that helpline that's right down there, 1-800-662-HELP, and they will walk you through all the next steps. But the biggest thing is take it seriously and do not leave that person if you know that they have a plan to carry out the act of suicide.
Very good, Deontay. So, recently, even yesterday, the day before, the young man that was killed by the police in Philadelphia, had mental health issues.
Yes.
Um,
I can remember another
Michael,
incident a while back where law enforcement officers actually shot a social worker that was helping one of
that's
his
right.
clients that was having a mental breakdown at that
Yeah,
time, and that was
they were
certainly
both. Yeah,
concerning for me because that would have been me. I wouldn't have left
yeah,
my client.
yeah.
But I'm
They
sorry
were
to cut
both.
you off. Go ahead.
No, but they were both sitting in the road, and I'm glad you brought that example up. The reason I brought it up is we have to recognize as a community, in particular the Black community, this goes back to those commonalities that you talked about earlier in this conversation. We know that the Black community is not a monolith because before we are Black, we are human.
Mm-hmm.
And we're human with all the frailties, with all the wonderful things about being human and all the bad things about being human also. We're human. And then through a systemic reasons, we're identified as Black. And through that, we have a commonality of how we're treated in America and across the globe. And unfortunately, when you have incidents such as what you just described, with the social worker being wounded trying to help his client, with the young man who was recently killed in Philadelphia, or George Floyd, or Ahmaud Arbery, or
Mm-hmm.
Sandra Bland, or Breonna Taylor. Every time one of these incidents happens, we are traumatized as a community.
Yeah. And also without realizing it, we become what's called conditioned to 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 the fact that we are less than, or our lives don't matter as much, even though no one may not be telling us that right in our face. But when we are constantly killed without cause and without punishment, it says to us that we are worth so much less than the rest of society. And that,
And they, yeah, go ahead.
no, you go. I'm sorry.
I would say they actually do tell us. People express themselves not only verbally but through their actions.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to constantly interpret their body language, interpret how they express themselves to us, has a black people, and we adjust ourselves to that. We're the only race, for lack of a better word, and we know race is a false construct, that has to wake up in the morning and consider how will my color how will my color make me adjust to the circumstances I'm going to face today.
Yeah.
You know, walking into a store, going to the bank, going to work, getting in our car and traveling to wherever we're traveling. If the tail light is out, it is possible that the color of our skin can escalate a situation. So the messages are loud and clear. And the reason I brought this up is, how do we collectively as a community, Ebony and Deontay, deal with this trauma? Because that's what it is. We deal with this trauma every day. And now add on to it in 2020, a pandemic and social justice movement that's happening as a result of the George Floyd, and now an election in the United States of America that people are still wondering who they're going to vote for, the racist, the blatant racist, or the nice but boring guy who, yeah, he's got issues, but come on, he ain't out here telling people to come and shoot us. He's not saying stand back and stand by, you know. So this is even more trauma upon trauma. Then you have these occurrences, situations like in Philadelphia, and there have been others, but Philadelphia's getting the news a little bit right now because they started rioting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but they've been going on all summer. All right. What you two are doing working together, I know we have a phone number and everything, but what else can we do as individuals in the moment? Because we have to be healthy as individuals so we can have a healthy household, so we can have a healthy neighborhood, so we can have a healthy community and healthy nation, and so on. What can we do as individuals to help ourselves?
So really, Deontay is really the person for that question. But I would just say, again, it depends on the person and what's going to be the right way to deal with it. And that's where a counselor like Deontay, will come into play with. He is the master at helping a person break it down, listening to that person, and helping that person figure out what's the best thing for them. So Deontay, you can go ahead and touch on that, because I know how I would deal with that. The way I deal with, it helps me to exercise. It helps for me to go outside. It helps for me to maybe read a book, number of different things, but that might be different for someone else.
I don't even think I'm going to look at this from a clinical perspective. I think, for me, I think that as opposed to individuals doing what they have to do to change this or to affect change in what's going on, I think we need to come together collectively and surround yourself with like-minded individuals that will, like you said, trauma. When you look at trauma, if you go to the hospital with a gunshot wound, the first thing they're going to do is stop the bleeding. They ain't going to try to take the bullet out before they stop the bleeding. It's counterproductive. So we have to look at what the root of the problem is. Why are we being treated this way? Who is treating us this way? And how do we affect positive change in that situation? Because as long as we continue, oh yes, we can certainly treat individuals who have been traumatized, but if something else is going to happen the next day that causes more trauma, we're not going to make any progress. So we need to look at, as a society, why are minorities viewed as less than? Why are we treated differently than others? And how can we change this? And I think things like, for example, right now, the sheriff is building a citizens review board to oversee things like escalation of force and police conduct. Things like that go a long way in both community trust in not only law enforcement but individuals in power. Period. We also can look at things like building trust again with our government, because especially in Georgetown, when you have individuals hanging up nooses in county vehicles and then not held accountable by those in the county who are elected to take care of us and to protect us, especially when they look like us, that certainly is something we need to address as well. And to make this all come together, it starts with the vote. And I hate to bring it back to this, but November 3rd is coming up. We have one more weekend of Saturday voting, and it starts at the booth. Until we can get the right people in office to affect positive change, we cannot have change in policy, and we will not have change in the ways in which individuals are viewed in this society, because the same thing will be constantly perpetuated. And it almost said S rolls downhill because that's what we said in the military a lot. But it starts from leadership. It starts from leadership, and then it trickles on down. And the way in which the leadership behaves is the way in which everyone at the lower level is going to behave. So we got to put the right people in those positions of leadership so that we can affect change, and so that we can change the way in which minorities are viewed in this society, how we're treated in this society. And once that happens, we can then look back and start to treat the trauma that has been compounded over these years. And we don't have to worry about the trauma that we just treated being reinflicted upon us.
Well, if I can piggyback off with what Deontay said, and that just goes to show how everything's interconnected. Everything that I concur with everything he said. Guys, please vote, 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 because all the advocacy work that we do in the community a lot of time hinges on policy or laws, regulations, things of that nature. And in the Black community, one thing I will say that I believe personally has been one of the barriers or breakdown is the family structure. And that's where I'm connecting it back with Deontay. It takes the community really to come together. That builds that foundation for the child. The child having, let's say, a grandparent, the parent, the cousins, the aunts, the teachers, the other mothers down the street. All in my community, they all help raise us. But then when you have certain breakdowns in the family household, such as dad or mom got incarcerated or kids were taken away, those things are dictated many times by policy. And that goes back to what you said, Miss Marilyn. We have to kind of watch out how we have to think about, as Black people, what does our day look like before we leave? Somebody may not come home tonight. A person could be locked up. Like today, my son was driving. He has his permit. I'm sitting there in the passenger side and I'm just watching everything, hopefully we won't get stopped, which he was doing everything correctly. But nowadays a person can get stopped for anything. So those are big barriers, and those are things to be concerned about. But please vote, seek counseling. One thing I will say, and we'll get back with technology. Now you don't even have to drive to anybody's office anymore. You can get counseling right on your phone.
Yes. Telehealth.
Telehealth. That's going to be the way of the world. And I think that people can feel more comfortable, some people, if you want to have these sessions in the privacy of your home or in your car, or wherever you feel safe, or you can come into the office. So utilize those things, utilize technology. I think COVID, that's one of the things that has made services more accessible for many people, not all, but many people, to be able to do it right from your phone. And mostly everybody has a phone.
I think the act of voting is taking ownership of solving the problem.
Yes.
Being involved in your community, using telehealth, that's being proactive regarding those 7 dimensions, Ebony, that you talk about. So it is all, you're right. I like to say it's all interconnected, one, because it's true. It's all interconnected. But until we take ownership of what we want to change, we will remain depressed. We will remain traumatized. And I'm not saying that to negate the responsibility of others for creating the system. What I'm talking about is you're voting, you can control voting. You can be proactive in one, getting registered to vote, and you can be proactive in going to vote. That's what you can control. And that act, it will compound itself into other action that will change the system. So you may not be able to change the system right now, but through those small acts that you can control, you ultimately will change the system. And I think that's what people have to get in their head. Take ownership and be proactive in addressing the problem, and that will change your whole world. It will change your whole perspective. And I think that's
Absolutely.
when we tell people go vote. That's what we're telling people. Take ownership. Be proactive in solving the problem. And that connects all of the 7 dimensions. That takes ownership. That's entrepreneurship, being a small business owner. When people say, well, I can't do that. You can do anything if you can read. You can.
Yeah.
So you need to take ownership on, if you don't know how to read, then take ownership and learn how. Because you can certainly learn how to read.
That's right.
You know, and there are books, different levels of reading, etc. That have, you don't have to be a PhD to say I'm a reader. Just read. Just read. And you start there, is taking ownership of that problem. We are at the end of our show. It was very interesting. It went quickly, so I'm going to wrap it up with the words that Ebony and Deontay said. This is longer than I thought it was going to take because it was good stuff. It was juicy, and so. But y'all have a chance to see it again. This will always be on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel for the Gallagher Chamber of Commerce under a gathering place. Please feel free to take a look at it. I want to thank Deontay and Ebony for joining us today and letting us know about the work that they're doing together to help our children, to help our families, and ultimately it's going to help our community. And you have a number at the bottom of the line if you are feeling that you are depressed, or if you are at a point where you are experiencing substance abuse or you need a mental well-being check. Call this number 1-800-662-HELP and just call it, folks. I call it, other people call it, you need to call it also. Ebony, thank you very much. You know I'm gonna bring you back on at some point.
I appreciate you for having me, having us
on.
on.
Thank you for coming. And Deontay, thank you for coming also. This is the most I heard Deontay talk in a while.
You know, I don't say much.
Y'all, Deontay just sit there in the hat and be cool. But thank you, Deontay. Thank you, Ebony, for joining me today. I really appreciate you coming, and we will see you next time.
All right.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day. We'll be talking.
All right. Take care.
I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this wonderful show. We got into a discussion about depression counseling that we really needed to hear. Ebony and Deontay are working together to build their businesses, but also to help our communities. And I want to remind everyone, take advantage of the National Helpline. Call 1-800-662-HELP if you are experiencing substance abuse, if you are experiencing mental health trauma. This is how we help our community grow and be stronger and be better, by helping each other. Reach out to Ebony, reach out to Deontay, and call 1-800-662-HELP. And let's get healthier together, everyone. Thank you for joining A Gathering Place today, hosted by the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. And remember, our show is semi-weekly, every Sunday and Wednesday at 4 p.m. on Facebook Live and our YouTube channel. Looking forward to see everybody Sunday at 4 o'clock. And remember, vote. You can vote now every day. And on Saturday, it's 9 to 12 noon in Georgetown County, South Carolina. And of course, nationwide, it is Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. that we can vote. Get out there, folks. Be proactive. Take ownership. Control your world. get out there and vote. Thank you. Have a good day, and we'll see you next time.